are at war with Japan.
But Australia will make him inch by inch, and that he shall not enter upon our country.
Now I am become death, the destroyer of worlds.
Hello, my name is Michael Madden. Welcome to the first ever episode of Virtual Battlefield Flyovers. This is X-Plane 11 and we are currently sitting above New Guinea. I am at home at the moment for the coronavirus shutdown, as many of you are, and I thought this would be a good exercise to keep myself sane, having watched my business, Berwick Military Metals, fall apart after 18 years of work thanks to the shutdown. I've thought this would be a good way to find an indoor distraction and something which could be helpful and entertaining, educational, and, as I say, hopefully keep me and others sane. The idea is to fly over in this simulator famous battlefields, not just Australian battlefields but others around the world. Open to suggestions if anybody's interested. Leave any suggestions in the comments below of any places you'd like me, or battlefields anywhere in the world, anywhere at all that you'd like me to fly over, and I'll try and talk a little bit about what they are and what happened. Today we're going to fly over the Kokoda Trail. Australians will be very familiar with that. I'm at Port Moresby in New Guinea. This is home to the Australians and others during World War II. Australia is that way to the south. That body of water was the only thing, that and the Australian Army, the only thing standing between Australia and the Japanese during World War II. Kokoda is off in that direction up there beyond those mountains. This will give you a really good idea of what was achieved by the Australians during the fight. We're going to fly into Kokoda Airstrip. It was an airfield that was taken and lost countless times by Australia and the Japanese. It was the subject of a lot of fighting. A lot of people died there trying to take it and hold it and retake it. This plane that I'm using is a Airfoillabs add-on. It's the Cessna 172 Skyhawk. We're just going to taxi out. I'll talk a little bit about myself and what I do and why I'm doing this and where the idea came from as we go, but for now the sun is getting low, so we're just going to get on with it. So we're going to fly off to the east and head north roughly over the track, and that will give you an idea, though this obviously is a simulator. The detail is pretty stunning, and it'll give you a good real feel for what the Australians went through, particularly the 39th Battalion. Just taxi out here. Now my grandfather was a captain in the Australian Army during World War II. He was stationed here. He was 2IC of 106 Tank Attack, second in charge. He died some time ago, and I never even really knew Pop was in the war. He never spoke about it. He was a fairly famous author, and being an author myself, that's kind of what I knew of him. It wasn't until after he died, which is so often the case, that I sort of learnt about what he did in the war, his involvement. I went to a reunion with my dad sometime after Pop died, and I met one of the men from his unit, and of course Pop being second in charge, 2IC, everybody in the unit knew who he was, so he sort of came up and said, "Oh, you're Teddy's grandson." My grandfather's name was Edward, so of course he was Teddy. And he told me some really great stories about Pop. All the funny stuff, as usual. And he told me once how Pop used to brag on returning to Australia how he did the Kokoda Track twice in one day. and the punchline of that being, of course, that he did it in an aircraft. He flew from here in Port Moresby to the track, which is exactly what I'm doing today. That story is what gave me the idea to do this. Obviously it's not the same, but that's okay. It's the best we can do, particularly being as we're all stuck at home at the moment. So the Australians, a lot of them had come from the Middle East, Kokoda, Tobruk and El Alamein, and the shocking fighting there against the Germans. They had a huge amount of success, and they came here to New Guinea just to find themselves fighting hand to hand in these jungles against the Japanese. The 39th Battalion wore the brunt of it. They were a militia. They were called Chocos, chocolate soldiers, and they acquitted themselves really well and became something of legend. As we get up towards Kokoda, you'll get a good feel for the lay of the land, how brutal it was, what the Australians had for them, what they had to endure and what they achieved. So the idea is to do these flights and give a little bit of education as I do it. I want to do Gallipoli, probably do Darwin, places in Vietnam like Bung Tau, Long Tan, obviously the Western Front, but not just Australian battlefields. I'd like to do Arnhem and the bridge too far, and obviously Normandy, the beach. So say if you are interested in this and there's any places you'd like me to have a look at, let me know and I'd be happy to do it. I am, as I said, an author. I guess my most noteworthy book is The Victoria Cross Australia Remembers. It is a book about Australia's 100 Victoria Cross recipients. That book was written as a not-for-profit exercise. All money goes to TPI Victoria. That's Totally and Permanently Incapacitated Ex-Service Persons Association. I did that because my dad is a TPI Vietnam veteran. He's totally and permanently incapacitated from his service during the war, and all the money from that book goes to that association, who do some great work, must be said. I'll try and use this aircraft for all of them, just because it's the perfect aircraft for the job. It's got a range of about 1,200 kilometres. It can climb beyond 15,000 feet. It's small enough that I can get into most small airports like the one I'm going to today. The track's actually off to our right a bit, I think, to the east. Obviously it's not marked here. And also this aircraft looks really good, and it is a real life simulator reproduction, as in it is a training level simulated aircraft. It's very difficult to fly. It is pretty much exactly like flying the real thing, or as close as you can get to it in a home simulator anyway. And it looks good, I think. I think it looks good. I love Cessnas, especially the 172. I have done some flight training in my life, in real life. Not in a Cessna, but I did fly Jabberoos out of Turin Airport near my hometown in Victoria. I absolutely loved it. I'd love to get back into it one day. Obviously money being the issue. Now I think we'll probably sit in, might go up to about 6,000 feet here. Now the airport is it's fairly high, but not, I think it's about 1,500 feet high. The problem is these mountains, which the army had to trek over are very high. I think they're about 8,000 feet. We've got to get over them and then drop quickly down to the airport. So I might climb to about 8 to maybe 9,000 feet and come in from there. When I was writing my book, The Victoria Cross Australia Remembers, I was really lucky. I got to travel the world and visit the Western Front. Met lots of really interesting people, and we were in the process of making a major documentary about the book and a Netflix series, 10-part series. We'd even started filming the documentary and shooting, but with the shutdown and other things, that has all now gone away. There will be no documentary, there will be no 10-part Netflix series, I'm afraid to say. The world just isn't what it was 3 months ago, as we all know. It's just the way it is. It's disappointing, but gee, there's people out there who've got a lot worse than me. I have other things I can do. The book is still out there and going strong. Have a look for it. The Victoria Cross Australia Remembers. As I said, all money from that book goes to help totally and permanently incapacitated veterans. Now this, you'll be really starting to get an idea of the terrain here and what the Australians had to deal with. A lot of people, it's a very popular thing to do these days, particularly among young Australians, is to actually walk the Kokoda Track. There are adventure tours you can do which take you through it. What you see here in this simulator is very close to the real thing. There's a hill there in this simulator, it exists in real life. Obviously it's not perfect, but the beauty of this simulator is that I can go anywhere in the world and show you any battlefield you like. There was a Victoria Cross earned on the Kokoda Track, Kingsbury. He earned his posthumously, which means he was killed in the action for which he was awarded it. There is a monument on the track to him. As I said, I want to do Gallipoli, and also I don't know if it's possible, but I'm a little bit obsessed with a Victoria Cross recipient by the name of Frank McNamara. He was Australia's only Victoria Cross recipient from pilot, only Victoria Cross pilot from World War I. I would love to find where his action took place, see if there's anything left of the airport there. There probably is. I'd like to fly his route, or at least part of it, and tell you his incredible story while I do it, because it is one of the most extraordinary stories of human courage and that you'll ever hear. Absolutely stunning what he did, and that applies to most Victoria Crosses. I'll look into that, see if I can do it. As I say, I also want to do Gallipoli. I can get a seaplane version of this and we can actually land on the beach. A couple of interesting things there. I don't think there's any airports around Anzac Cove, but as I say, with an airplane, a seaplane, sorry, I can actually land on the beach, the water just before the beach, or I might even be able to put this thing down on the beach, or even a smaller aircraft, I don't know. I'll have a look into it. I'd prefer to keep using this same one if we can, but the water seaplane version is very similar to this anyway. It will do the same job. So I was saying earlier about my grandfather, it's quite funny. He never spoke about the war, and it wasn't until, as I said, his mate told me the story of how he bragged about doing the Kokoda Track twice in one day that I even really knew he was in the war. I'm lucky enough to have his original medals at home now. Look after them on behalf of my family. I feel very lucky and privileged to have them. If you do have any of your family's service medals, do take care of them. It's about 20 years of being a medal mounter. I can tell you one thing I constantly see is people wearing original medals on Anzac Day and losing them. And trust me, I've heard it all. They fall off, they get stolen, broken, damaged. I've heard it all. After most Anzac days I get at least one family come in to tell me something that's happened on Anzac Day, that they've lost their medals and what can they do to get them reissued. You need to understand that if the service person is dead, they do not reissue the medals under any circumstances. The people falsely believe that they will, but they will not. Even if your house burns down, they will not reissue them. So the question, we're going to settle at 9,000 feet here, so I don't know if it's going to be high enough to get over this range. We'll see how we go. But if you do wear original medals on Anzac Day, you need to probably think a little bit about that, about why you're doing it. And the way I explain it to people is really simple. You are presenting yourself on Anzac Day, at the service on Anzac Day on that family member's behalf, because they can't, because they're dead. And that is a really good thing to do, and you absolutely should do that. It's a wonderful way to remember them and to honour their service, and I'm not saying that you shouldn't do that, you absolutely should. But you need to understand that you are just a representation of that service. You're not the actual serviceman, you're not the actual soldier. You are a representation, therefore the medals only need to be a representation of the real thing too. It doesn't make a difference. And the medals that you've got, if they're your grandfather's or your dad's or your great-grandfather's, they are not yours. You did not earn them. You are custodian of them, and that's very important. But it's also important to remember that they are the only set you'll ever have. They are irreplaceable. And the way I see it with my grandfathers is, what right do I have to put them at risk on behalf of the rest of my family? And the way I feel about it is I don't have that right. So I wear replicas. If I wear anything at all, I'm often doing a lot of media or public speaking on Anzac Day. So I normally don't wear medals anyway. If I do, I wear replicas. I would never wear my grandfather's. I wouldn't even let them out of the house. And I've just seen too many cases where things have gone wrong. So look after them if you've got them. Get some replicas if you can. And I encourage you to wear replicas. Everybody in the family can wear replicas. It's just a smart thing to do. As I say, once they're gone, they are gone. Now Kokoda is behind this ridge line. I think we're going to go to the right here and slip in through here. The Kokoda Track. Now I've never walked it. Again, this is a simulator, so it's very difficult to tell actually where it is. This gives you a really good idea of what the Australians faced. This is what they had to cross. Absolute nightmare. It was done in shocking conditions, brutal hand-to-hand fighting with a highly skilled, highly determined, lethal enemy. And it was a real situation of do or die. So if you're finding things hard at the moment with the coronavirus shutdown, everything we're going through, spare a thought for what 2 generations, well in my case 2 generations ago, had to deal with. This was their version of the coronavirus shutdown. Economically it was just as bad or worse, but what they had to deal with was far, far worse. And it puts things into perspective, and hopefully that's the message that we can get across here through all this, that as bad as this is, and I don't want to diminish how serious this is at all. I know it's bad, and I'm not downplaying that at all, but sorry, I'm just walking around doing things here I shouldn't be doing. Okay. Yeah, it could be worse. Other generations have dealt with worse. We have been asked by our nation to stay home, to look after each other, to protect ourselves, and to protect people more vulnerable than us, particularly the elderly, and people who literally fought here, still alive, and this is why we're doing it. And this is the hill that our government, our country is asking us to hold. They're asking us to stay home. You can do that with a bottle of wine and Netflix and your family. It's not that big a deal. We'll get through it. Obviously, again, it pales into significance when compared to what others before us have done. For me, the shutdown has done more than just devastated my business. Anzac Day is by far the busiest time of the year for me. It's also, as an author, I do a lot of public speaking. I had public speaking events all around Australia lined up, including on Anzac Day. I was to be guest speaker for the Essendon Football Club for the Anzac Day game. They have a fundraiser at the Crown Casino before the game, which is about 1,000 people. I was guest speaker, and the theme was going to be my book, The Victoria Cross Australia Remembers. We had about 20 or 30 Victoria Cross family members lined up to come and join us on the day to try and raise money for TPI Victoria and other charities. That's all gone away now. Obviously that didn't happen. Then obviously off to the ground in front of another 100,000 people. We were looking at, I was working with Kevin Sheedy and the Essendon Football Club at setting up a motorcade where we put some Victoria Cross family members in jeeps and have them going around the ground remembering the VC recipients from their families. It was very, very hard to take, losing that. I think we could have really done a lot of good with that, but Essendon have just been absolutely fantastic, really supportive. I'm a Carlton supporter, so this is hard for me to say, but they have been brilliant. They've welcomed us back next year. Keith Payne VC, the Victoria Cross recipient from Vietnam. Keith's a friend of mine. He'll be coming next year, and if all goes well, we'll get that motorcade going again, and we'll have Keith on the ground. And if you're watching on TV or if you're at the ground, you should see Keith at the Essendon Collingwood game going around the ground. Keith will be about 87, I think, by next Anzac Day. All going well. It'd be a wonderful tribute to him, and then he'll be coming to the Crown Casino beforehand for that. So it's a long way off, but it's something to look forward to. Essendon had to pull the pin on this one. They've continuing to support the book and me and TPI and everything else, and it's pretty special, pretty wonderful that they're doing that. So we just have to hunker down and get through this tough time. So I believe the track is down there somewhere. Cutting through these mountains. We're going to fly through this gap here. I could have just gone straight over, but then the airfield is directly behind this. You'd have to drop about 5,000 feet in about 20 seconds, which obviously you can't do in real life or in a simulator. We'll end up nose first in the dirt if we try that. I may have to fly a bit of a circuit around to burn off a bit of altitude as it is, but it'll be nice coming in anyway. It'll give you a good idea of the lay of the land and what the Australians faced. Take us through a little bit closer to the mountain here. We should slip through there, no problem. I think it's behind here. I've always wanted to walk the Kokoda Track. As I said, I've never done it. If you have any comments, please leave them. Any advice for people who might be planning to do it, any good companies or any advice that if you've done it that you can pass on, please leave it in the comments below. As I said, there was one Victoria Cross awarded for actions on the Kokoda Track. That was Bruce Kingsbury. Very brave man, and his citation is incredibly impressive, as all VC citations are. He laid down his life for his mates. If you don't know much about the Victoria Cross, its history and how the award came about, there's a lot of detail in the book. It is incredible. The story of the VC itself, its heritage, and when I was making the book, I was very, very lucky. I was invited to Windsor Castle by the Queen to look at the prototype Victoria Cross that was made for Queen Victoria in 1856 by Hancock's in London. Hancock's make all Victoria Crosses. This is the one that was actually made for Queen Victoria. It's a prototype, and that is now property of Queen Elizabeth, and with it she has the first VC ever issued. I got to hold both of them in my hand, as I understand it, the only Australian ever to do that. And I also got to go into the vault where the VC, that the metal that VCs are made from, is kept. As most people know, I think. I can turn the autopilot off here and start bringing us down. As most people seem to know, the VC is made from bronze from cannons captured. There's the airport down there. Yeah, we're very, very high. We'll have to fly. Might fly around to the west and come in from the northwest. Yeah, so the Victoria Cross is made from cannons that were captured during the Crimean War. Legend tells us that the cannons were Russian cannons captured during the Battle of Sebastopol. That's not entirely true. They were captured during the Crimean War, from what I've discovered. I didn't discover it, but from what I learned, they certainly were nowhere near Sebastopol when they were captured. I'm not sure where they were. And legend also tells us that they were melted down. I've heard that many times. That isn't true. They are alive and well. There's two cannon. They are in a museum in the United Kingdom. You can go and see them. What they did is they took the caster bell off the back of one of them. That's the big, round, heavy bit at the back of the cannon that they tie ropes to secure the cannon down, trying to control the massive recoil of these big guns. And they cut a bit of that caster bell off, enough to make about 12 or 14 VCs whenever it's needed. They take that away and they melt that down, and Hancock's craft the VCs from that piece of metal. And it's probably, what's left of that caster bell is probably the most valuable anything anywhere on the planet. It is held under immense security. As I said, I was with my mate Gordon Trail, who worked as the photographer on the book. Gordon is a totally and permanently incapacitated Iraq War veteran. We were invited to go into the vault, and we're the only Australians ever to go in there, the vault where that metal is kept, and we got to hold it, touch it. To give you a bit of an idea of how seriously they take this, the metal is kept in a base in Shropshire in the United Kingdom. It's the base where they keep all their small arms, their nuclear and chemical warfare suits. It's an incredibly high secure base, and inside that base there's a building where they keep all the small arms, and inside that building there's a vault. Inside that vault there's a huge alarmed safe which is kept under constant CCTV surveillance. And inside that safe there's a big wooden box with a huge padlock on it. When I got in there, the padlock wasn't locked, but I don't think they had too much to worry about. The soldiers at the base told me that the security inside that vault is second only to the security they keep for nuclear warheads. This is how seriously they take the Victoria Cross in the UK. The Victoria Cross is the highest award for valour that can be awarded by any British Commonwealth country for valour in the face of the enemy. 100 Australians have been awarded it. 1,356 have been awarded worldwide to 1,353 men. 3 of them have received it twice. 2 British and 1 New Zealander. So we're still a long way up. We'll make our way down. So that's the airport that was fought over so brutally. That's Kokoda. See that huge cut through the mountain up there. It's interesting. So there's not much there even today. You can see this ridge line that the Australians trekked over many times, backwards and forwards, fighting with the enemy. Absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. So, as I said, the VC is the highest award for valour you can get, but it's more than that. The Victoria Cross is the highest award for anything you can receive. When you're awarded a VC, you get the post-nominals VC, the Victoria Cross, after your name. No matter what else you do in your life, if you could be awarded a Nobel Prize, a PhD, a knighthood, nothing comes before VC. It is always first. It is the highest award in the world and virtually impossible to receive now. I've been lucky enough to hold probably 30 or 35 of them in my hands. And I can tell you, holding a real Victoria Cross in your hand is a pretty incredible experience, one that not many people will get these days. So most Victoria Crosses are in, Australian ones anyway, are in the Australian War Memorial, which is a good thing. But it does mean that it's very unlikely that you'll ever get your hands on one. There are about 3 left in families and one I think in a private collection. As a medal mounter, I've had the honour of actually mounting a real one. Albert Barella is the VC and the military medal. I actually mounted his original VC, probably valued at about $1.2 million. I actually did a bit of a time lapse of that job. You can see it on my website. Berwick Military Medals. I know his son. Those medals are now in the Australian War Memorial in the Hall of Valour, which is a wonderful thing for the country. So I'm going to attempt to turn around now. I hope I'm not too high, and we'll come on in. This gives you a real good feeling of the terrain and what the Australians faced when you put a highly trained, brutal, determined enemy in the bush with them. And you can tell this was not a fun place to be during the war, not fun at all. Yeah, my grandfather, being 106 Tank Attack, his job was to take out tanks, Japanese tanks in New Guinea. So you may not know, or you may, that the Japanese tanks never got past Milne Bay in New Guinea. The Australians defeated the Japanese army at Milne Bay and destroyed their tanks. They never got them out of there, so Pop never had to deal with them in this area. Something I'm sure he was grateful for. And in fact, the battle at Milne Bay, where the Australians defeated the Japanese, was the first time the Japanese were defeated in a land battle during the war. Something I don't think gets enough attention, what was achieved at Milne Bay. It was literally the first military victory against the Japanese of the war. Once we get down, we can have a bit of a look around. And you get a real good feel for the size of the mountains that had to be crossed. Not my best landing there. I've been joined by my daughter Maddie. Hi Maddie.
No, stop.
Thank you. So here we are. This is Kokoda. So this is Kokoda. This is what all the fighting was about. The sun's starting to set there. It's very hazy, but it gives you an idea. This is what was crossed by the Australian Army during the war. Countless lives lost. Port Moresby is over there. I think that's it in that direction, and Australia off over the horizon. Well, that's it. Hopefully these videos, trips might be of some interest to some people. If not, that doesn't matter. It will keep me sane and keep me entertained. I'll probably do Gallipoli next, or as I said, if I can work out the way to do the flight of Frank McNamara, I'll certainly do that.